Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back for another episode of the Corona Spotlight. I am your host, Gayle Nicholson. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have another amazing episode planned for you. Today's stuff is not just about altering your habits because of coronavirus and sheltering in place and all the things that we're having to do with quarantine right now. It's also about altering your health for now and for the long run. So, before I get too far ahead of myself, let me introduce to you my guest for today, Dr. Joan Tekula. She is a specialist with anti aging through biohacking, and I am so very excited to talk to you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Gail. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
Me too. Me too. We've got so much to talk about. Um, so let me just kind of check in to begin with. How are you doing with this sheltering in place? How are you doing with everything that's going on? What are you seeing from where you sit?
Well, from where I sit, it's very limited because I've been home, indeed, sheltering in place. So I only have a view of two streets and my two dogs. How am I doing with everything? There's a lot of sadness, sick, loss, fear, and that all is, it's out there. And I know that everybody is experiencing a different experience based on the people in their lives and whether they are actually intimately involved with people who have been infected or if they're kind of isolated like I am. But that being said, I am doing very well, actually sheltering in place. I've lived alone for quite a long time. My kids have grown and left, and my knee jerk reaction was to have sold my large home and downsized. And thank God I didn't, because me and my two dogs live in this big house, and it's my village. This is my little town, my town right here. All of it, the grocery store, the everything, on my entertainment. And I'm good at being alone. I enjoy my company, and I work from home a lot of the time. So the transition has been pretty good. I have an awareness that things are changing, that even when this lifts and people are safe to go out and businesses resume and people are going out and communing, getting together in public, that things are not going to be the same. And I'm wondering what it's going to bring about. I am kind of the eternal optimist, and I think there's going to be a lot of very positive change. So that's where I keep my sights.
Excellent, excellent. I tend to agree with you. I think that this is a gateway into some better possibilities than the track that we have been on for a long, long time. And that's just my own opinion. And like you, I'm the hopeful optimist. Um, yeah, rather than a hopeless romantic, I'm a hopeful romantic, so to speak.
I
You
like
know. Now, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the fact that you do live from home, right? And so it's not like the neighbors are coming by for coffee. What do you do to reach out and connect with other people? Or is it just you and the dogs?
Right now, it's just me and the dogs. Been doing a lot of electronic connection, Zoom. I've celebrated Passover with my family and extended family. We're all in different states. We were able to bring more people together for a Seder than we usually can because of this technology. Just a little background. I don't think we covered that. Actually, my specialty is in podiatric medicine. I've been a podiatric physician for 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, I don't even have a private practice. I've been working for in a psychiatric hospital for many, many years. And I only visit. It's a residential hospital. The patients are, they're there. So when I show up, they're there. And when I leave, they're still there. So it's always been a really flexible schedule because the focus is on psychiatric care
Mm-hmm.
and it is residential. And there's a huge fear of there being, confirmed cases and a spread and limited place to isolate. They are limiting the number of people coming in from outside. And so I haven't actually been there in a month. So I've had to become even more resourceful when it comes to reaching out and connecting with people.
Now, have
I
you
do
done
work
any
a
of
bit.
that telephonic doctoring yet? I mean, I don't imagine that it's come up in the niche where you're at up until now.
Well, it hasn't, but it also, mine is really a hands-on profession. It is all about manipulating the foot. Even the diagnoses have to be done through touch. Does this hurt? Because the foot is very complex. So someone can say their foot hurts. Well, what does that mean? Is it muscular? Is it bony? Is it, is it a ligament? Is it torn? Is there hypermobility? Is it a nerve involvement? I can't do that through telemedicine. So
Gotcha.
definitely out. It's I'm either there and present with the patient, or I can't help them. I can do a little bit of masterminding over the phone with some of the docs that are already there, but
Hmm.
I haven't done any calls.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting to see how much we will be able to move into the realm of doing it by video, by distance. Um, I'll be honest with you personally, I was really surprised and delighted to hear that you could do a cedar with technology because I'm not Jewish. I don't necessarily know all of the rules of stuff, but I know that there's like technology lockdown. You're not allowed to have anything working for you in certain time periods. And I would
Right.
have thought Passover was like that. So that's very interesting to me to find out differently.
Good for you for knowing even that much. That's more than the general population. No, we are not Orthodox. Orthodox definitely would not have incorporated any kind of electronic anything during that most holy day. But we are not Orthodox. It's really about the celebration of what the Jews experienced, and
Hmm.
we are happy to bring in technology if it means bringing a family together. So
That's wonderful.
worked
That's
out.
absolutely wonderful. I love that. Okay, cool. So, how did you get into? Well, let me wait to ask that later because it doesn't seem like podiatry and well, maybe anti-aging and biohacking do kind of come into, partnership there. But first, let me ask you a couple other questions. Now, specifically with regard to what's been going on with coronavirus and the sheltering in place and that type of thing, right? People are having a lot of challenges in that area. Um, Hard to find a balance, especially when they've got younger kids in the house, and they're trying to deal with working from home, homeschooling, you know, um, getting rambunctious kids to settle down and do their things. I know that you've been a professional and an entrepreneur for a long time and a single mom raising two kids. How did you manage that? And how did you find time for self care in that? Do you have any advice for our people that are kind of suffering with it right now?
I think I do, yeah, because I was totally out of balance initially. Just a little background on my interest in medicine and my choice of professions. It was never, I never went into this field because I wanted to be a wealthy person. I wanted to be independent financially and be able to raise my children. So my priority was always to make enough money to enjoy being a mom, not the other way around, not neglect my family and make so much money. I don't know what do you do with all that extra money anyway? And that being said, I had planned part-time practice from the beginning, was always part-time, so I could spend most of the time with my kids. And that's what afforded me the time to start businesses from home. And I was oftentimes very out of balance because I think that when you think that you're going to build something for your family and generate an income where you can really be with them, you're willing to push them aside in payments in advance of the freedom you'll experience later. And quite honestly, I didn't do the same to the business when I was spending time with my kids. So I was with my children and the phone would ring and I'd take the call. But if I was working my business, I didn't allow my children in the room. And it was pretty strict in that direction. That lack of balance was not fair to them and did not instill a really good sense of self and importance to my children. So I fairly quickly learned that I needed to strike a balance by really giving my undivided attention to my children,
Mm-hmm.
not letting business get in that, come into that space that I held for them. And then when I was doing my business, they had a lot more respect for the fact that they needed to give me my space. And the same was true for my workouts. I've been a very passionate gym rat for as long as I can remember, since my early 20s. And I call it my drug of choice. If I sweat up a storm, I am the nicest gal imaginable, but do not don't take that away from me because I'm afraid to find out what happens. So I taught my children, even as babies, I would say, if you fall down, kiss your knee, you're your mommy. Right now, mommy is taking care of herself so she can be a better mommy. And what it did was I didn't feel I was depriving my children at all. I was being honest. I was putting the oxygen on myself first so I could take care of my kids.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I taught them self-care and the importance of that in the grand scheme of things, because I was a better mom because I did that. And so a little at a time, I struck a balance. And I feel for the parents of today that have not worked at home with their children. But that's the best advice I could give, is to really focus on your children when you're with your children. And
Nice.
then ask them to please respect that there's another part of you that needs to be addressed in order to generate the income, keep your profession, keep your business alive, whatever it takes, and that they need to respect that. And I think that's an important lesson.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. To follow up on that a little bit, I was talking, what was it, yesterday, a couple days ago, with a guest who we talked a little bit about this theory of tanking, that moms, dads, even, and children are connected beings, right? They come from the same, cells, essentially. And when your children are acting up, you can usually look and see where your own anxiety level is leading to that. It's like there are two separate tanks with a connector along the bottom, and when the pressure comes down on mommy's tank, the bubbles rise in baby's tank, right?
Hmm.
Have you ever found that for yourself? Observed it as a doctor, or noticed it in raising your children. What is your thought on that?
Well, I think that what you're saying, I mean, that image is an interesting moment. I'm trying to relate it to people. I think that in general, when I had more anxiety and I was more stressed, they felt stressed because they are dependent on me. And if mom seems to be falling apart, what kind of stability does that impart to them? Their security is being kind of challenged or jeopardized. Um, and so I think it's really important to keep your peace. I see a lot of family dynamics, and I'm really sensitive to family dynamics because I was an observer in my own home. We didn't really communicate, but you could feel it, like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
oh, things are not good in here today. Kind of feel like I almost thought I wished I would get smacked so I could explain to people why I felt so like, I had a terrible day. What happened? Well, nothing really, but it wasn't a good day, kind of thing. It's just about the feelings. But I think that I feel see a lot of people actually need to have that as the tie that binds the family, and they kind of get together and they fret over things and they talk about it. And obviously, a much healthier approach would be, since there's nothing we can do about certain situations like this other than being respectful of the fact that we're being asked to stay home and help flatten the curve. It's a much smarter approach to look for the more positive about what's going on here and try to share that with your children, and the positive energy flow that comes from that, and the peace and the constructive atmosphere that creates. Is that what you'd ask? Did
Yeah,
I follow that?
basically, I was just looking for your thoughts on it, and that was beautiful. I think the last part of what you alluded to as well, the connection, that eyeball to eyeball, I'm right here in this bubble with you. Connection
Right.
makes all the difference in the world, especially for kids. One of the things that we had been talking about is the fact that we as adults have gotten so acclimated to a high anxiety lifestyle, rush hour traffic, got to make it there on time, blah, blah, all of these things that are applying pressure, and we're just having to survive it, right? And then we come home and we wonder why our kids can't calm down and go to sleep, because
Right.
we're operating at this level constantly that we've gotten used to, and they're trying to manage it. So
It has
that's
everything to do with dopamine release. It has everything to do with the neurotransmitters in the brain. And we live at a certain level of excitation. You have to do everything at that level, because anything short of that is just boring. And I got to tell you, I'm guilty of it. Not that I live my life like that, because I do kind of try to keep an even keel. My exercise is meditative. Generally, I just zone out. I'm not thinking about anything else. Otherwise, I'll lose my footing, or whatever exercise, the yoga, or whatever. But that being said, I forgot where I was going with that. I do that all the time. I take myself on tangents. I'm like, oh, come on back. Where were you going with that one?
it's like Dr.
Um,
Carolyn Miss says, just stick around, I'm coming back.
Lisa, I need some help. What was I saying?
Oh,
Can I phone a friend on this one?
right.
But
Well,
the idea
actually, I think this leads really well into biohacking, because if we're living at this high level of anxiety, right? Um, how do we literally, how do we biohack ourselves to, to recognize, okay, anxiety level is in the red zone. What do I need to do to bring that back down to homeostasis?
So I remembered what I was going to say, and it was
Okay.
that I too was addicted to electronics, which are like this. It's instant gratification.
Oh yeah.
So when I sit down to write a book, well, if I sat down to write a book, I'd have a whole new set of problems. But when I sit down to read a book, I find that even though I know that I have some level of ADHD anyway, I am having more trouble concentrating reading than ever before because it just isn't stimulating enough. Where's the next page? How do I wait? Can I touch this book and have things change? No, it's the old fashioned. You have to sit and read from left to right and follow to the next. It's very challenging. And there's been a real shift in how we live our lives and what's become addictive. And yes, we bring it home and we spread the wealth and it's hopefully this will be a time that people will see that and spend more time eyeball to eyeball and not using electronics and just connecting and maybe slowing that whole thing down.
Nice.
Biohacking, I have a passion for biohacking, and I say it goes back to when I was 4 years old, which was in 1965. And my sister was diagnosed as terminally ill. She was diagnosed as diabetic, which at that time really was a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And the reason it was opened my eyes and why it had such a profound impact on me at 4, which everybody will admit is probably about as young as you can be impacted by anything that has any memory attached to it, is that I realized that, and I had a unique situation because with diabetes, what you eat impacts your health, right?
Right.
So I had the opportunity to realize and learn that what I was going to eat was going to impact my health. Nobody else knew that. Doctors didn't know that. The doctors aren't taught that today. So I was biohacking from an early age, awareness that if I ate carbs in the morning, I felt poorly. By lunch, I wanted to eat my own hand off. I was so hungry. I didn't do well with carbs. I read the Pritikin diet when I was about 18, and that's when it was published. I thought I'd read it earlier, but I checked it wasn't published till 79. So I must have been 18. And I learned there was a connection between what you ate and what it did to your body, that you could actually stave off bowel cancer, never have bowel cancer if you ate a high fiber diet.
Wow.
So biohacking is taking small steps in an effort to impact your genetic expression. So people will say that you're doomed to, I'm going to get cancer because my mom had cancer, or, I have a long line of cardiac patients. I'm going to die of a heart attack. And there's a very small percentage of that that's accurate. The rest of it is based on what is called epigenetic influence. Those
Okay.
genes do not need to be expressed. Biohacking means you do the things you need to do, right? Moving in that right direction to suppress the expression of those less desirable genes.
Interesting.
So, and that includes a spectrum of things. Biohacking can be making sure you get a good sleep, an exercise program, eating right, thinking right. Your thoughts and your beliefs impact strongly on your health. And that's why there's such a thing as a psychosomatic illness. It's not you're imagining it. You're every bit sick. The blood work will show it, your symptoms will show it, but it came from your psyche. You believed it, and therefore you expressed that, and now you are truly sick because of that. So
Now,
likewise, when I
I
put
have
that,
an example of that. Sorry to interrupt you. I do want to interrupt you, but um, this is actually as real as I can explain it. There were times when I was younger where I would call into work basically just feeling awful because I didn't get enough sleep or maybe my hormones were acting up, right? I did not want to deal with work. So I would call in and tell my boss that I was sick, and I'll be damned if by 11 o'clock that morning I had not literally thought myself into exactly the sickness that I told my boss that I had. Once I recognize that, I'm like, I'm not lying about being sick ever again. Like, no,
no, we're
the cost is not worth it.
right, exactly. Well, you're powerful. You're a powerful manifester. It doesn't always come that quickly, but it certainly can. And like I said, I took that vow at 4 that I don't do sick, and I don't. I mean, I can be around sick people. I can share a drink with them, and I just don't tend to get sick from it. And I know it's a decision for whatever reason. My immune system is hyper vigilant, or there's
Well,
it's
I think it's
a lot of
not just
impact.
one decision. I think it's a lifestyle of decisions. It is
Absolutely.
the building your, bodily strength through exercise. It is managing what you eat because you know how it impacts your body. It is strengthening over years of making these wise decisions of strengthening your immune system. So you and I might go, okay, this is a no-brainer, but this is not what the medical industry is being taught. is
No,
health at all, is it?
no, because there's no money in prevention. The money is in the sickness. There's no money in cure. The money is in the maintenance. It's sickness maintenance. And it's not, I'm not being anti, Western medicine, even though I am. That's the reality is when you look at the practices and what we're taught, it's like, let's find the sick person. They're sick and we know it because their blood work says so. Not, they're telling me I have symptoms, they have symptoms and they don't have blood work changes yet, but I'm going to trust this person. Let's see what we can do to prevent that from happening in the first place. That's not the training of the conventional Western trained physician. You may
Yes.
be a naturopath or an integrative medicine specialist or a functional medicine specialist, which are branches that have developed only fairly recently or been brought in from the East, where that is how they treat patients.
Right. I am so grateful for my naturopath.
Oh, me too.
There's
Oh, my word.
there have been answers and so much available when you are willing to look for it and willing to God, I think my doctor's office is 30 miles away from me. It's worth it.
It's worth every foot.
Every moment in traffic. Yes.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Herb is a perfect example. I had blood work done with an MD because that's the only gynecologist I could get. And she said, no, your levels of progesterone are too low. So I go to the naturopath. He said, of course they're low because they're all in the receptor sites. Your blood levels are always low. Like, he should know that, but that's not important to her. She teaches blood work. I am a person, not I'm a comprehensive. If I say that I'm irritable and whatnot, I think my estrogen levels are low, don't take my blood. Let's figure it out. So yeah, that's my natural. And I love when the new insurance company says that that's a specialist. I'm like, yeah, no, not a specialist. That's what I use for my primary medicine because I'm not going to these MDs that see my cholesterol's high but fail to notice it is because my HDL is through the roof. Let's pay attention to the fine points of this stuff and what
and the
is
relationality of it. That was one of the things that I learned going to my naturopath when she did do my blood work. She's like, look, most of the time doctors look at it on, is this number high or is this number low? But we're looking at the entire system here. Relationally, is it high compared to this? Well, no, they're all high. So guess what? You just set yourself a new bar. What's really high and low for you? That's different than what the compendium says that this is supposed to be a high number and this is supposed to be a low number. It just doesn't fit when you get down to individual science. What's your body say? What's your body do? I'm 4'8" tall. Don't give me a normal dose of anything. I will, it'll have more to it than I need. We
got to do kids dosing for you.
Pretty much, yeah, for the most part. Until quarantine 15 hit, I was under 100 pounds.
Oh, please don't even go there. I thank God I have a walk-in. Part of my effort to biohack my health, I own a backboard, a neck hammock, a Peloton, and I have a walking treadmill desk. So it's a treadmill with the desk is attached so that I don't have to sit because, as you know, sitting is the new smoking.
Yeah.
So if I'm not outdoors walking, I can walk on my treadmill for hours.
That's
just
phenomenal.
slowly, just so I'm moving. I love it.
But
there's elements of biohacking. It's become a little bit newer and it's more focused on food. And it's the science or the practice of using plants and plant products to impact genetic expression.
Now, is that what nutrigenomics is? Or is that different?
That's my understanding. Nutra meaning nutrition. And genomics meaning the impact on your genes. So
awesome.
Yeah, I believe plants and plant. Yeah, not to be applied, but to be ingested.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about that because this is the first time I've ever even heard this word really and had it stick is nutrigenomics. So eating food with the intention that it's going to actually impact your DNA. This is interesting.
Right. By the DNA, we mean the expression of it. So every DNA strand has all the genetic material for you. That's what cloning is about, right? But within that, you have negative and positive things. You have your blue eyes, you have your darling little stature, you have your whatever, your great sense of humor or your strength in your body or your muscles, whatever. But you also have the propensity towards certain weaknesses that are genetically transferred. And those do not need to be expressed, as I'd said earlier. Just because you come from a long line of people who have cancer or diabetes or autoimmune diseases or whatever, you can have absolutely no diseases whatsoever. And one of the approaches to that is through nutrigenomics. And I think it includes doing things like taking iron if you're iron deficient, and folic acid if you're pregnant, to make sure you don't have a baby with spina bifida, and all these, what do you call it, palmetto, isn't it? Saw palmetto for men and prostate problems, those kinds of things. But it's also in general, food matching, getting adequate amounts of a variety of foods so that you get all the nutrition you need. So even things you need trace amounts of are present. Because the body is incredible. It's a healing machine. It can compensate for a lot. It will take from Peter to pay Paul and make it work. But over a long period of time, if you have deficiencies, there is a breakdown of whatever system is most immediately impacted by that, or wherever your genetic predisposition is to have a weakness.
Okay.
So that's the idea of plants and plant products.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So I was one of those like you, where I grew up in a household where my mother's mother was a brittle diabetic, and she died when my mom was 13. So because of and what they mean by a brittle diabetic is what you can eat, you're mostly allergic to. So it was very, very little that she could actually eat that was good for her.
Actually means that the blood sugar, so a brittle diabetic generally is a type 1 diabetic, which means they have pancreatic failure, rather than more of a lifestyle diabetes where you have insulin insensitivity. The insulin receptors on the organs that are supposed to take up the excess glucose from the blood, those being like the liver and the muscle cells, those receptors become insensitive because of abuse, because of an excessive amount of sugar and this constant what's called a hyperinsulinemia. So when you eat something with sugar, your pancreas is told to release insulin. The insulin goes to these receptor sites and say, take the glucose up. Well, if you're constantly have these elevated levels, the pancreas is like whopping out tons and tons of insulin beyond what you need. Then you have a drop in blood sugar and a decrease in sensitivity of the receptors. I hope that wasn't too
No,
detailed.
but that makes complete sense why my mother would tell me when I was 3 what she couldn't eat. Rather than the explanation that you just gave, because I was just little at the time. She's like, yeah, this is what happened to grandma.
And the idea is that there's certain things that are cause more instability in the blood sugar than others, and that's what the diabetic diet is about. They can eat ice cream, but not pasta, because pasta is a rapid rise in blood sugar, but ice cream is slowed down because of the fats. And brittle means the blood sugars go very high and very low. Very high is dangerous. Very low is extremely dangerous because the brain only functions on glucose. So below 40 or so, there's actually deprivation in the brain.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Like stroke.
Interesting. So, well, long story short, I grew up in a home where because of my mom and her relationship with her mom being a type 1 diabetic, she always felt like she was going to end up with some form of diabetes, and she did. She manifested type 2 when she was 60. And my godmother was born with a hole in her heart. So she was also diabetic. So all growing up, I learned how to bake pies without sugar and stuff like that. It was just what you were conscious of in life. And I don't know where exactly I was going with that, but
I can tell you where that's a perfect example of nutrigenomics. You influenced your genetic expression through your food. You avoided the sugar, the insult.
Mm-hmm. And as I got older, actually I was working a cubicle farm kind of job with a wonderful cafeteria. And I put on about 20 pounds and went to the doctor, and they said, you're pre-diabetic. And I knew exactly what to do for my body to get back out of that tunnel with no exit, because of all of that, because of learning growing up that nutrigenomics or nutrigenomics.
So in this case, you turn your genetic predisposition into an asset. Instead of succumbing to it and saying, throw it out my hands, I'm gonna have diabetes because everybody in my family has it. You said, wait a minute, I know what that looks like and I know how to avoid it. And you execute it
Yes.
and you're safe.
Yes.
So
So how do we get
that's
this in schools?
say that again.
How do we get this in schools so they're teaching the kids all the way along? Hey, are you predisposed to this? Okay, this is what you need to do to reverse engineer it, so to speak.
We do it one person at a time. We're on a mission here.
There you
This
go.
is what I'm all about, and the people I surround myself with. This is what we do.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your technology scout. What does that mean?
So I've been a passionate entrepreneur for many, many years, and well, that means that I've spent a lot of time making no money, and it's cost me more than it's earned me. That's really what that means. But with all that investment, I've learned a lot about business and what works and what does not for me. And I became qualified to be somebody who, okay, so I'm sure you don't know this. Most people don't. I certainly didn't, whenever I started with the company, but the government funnels millions of dollars into labs around at universities and government laboratories for the scientists to come up with inventions that are going to change the world. Mm-hmm. And so they're in the biomedical or biotech industry. There's everything from, cures for cancer and different ways to treat pain that aren't opioid involved, specific disease processes. And the scientists work it to a certain point, and then they rely on a company like mine to come in, recognize the value of it, and then come in with investors and take it the balance of the process through the human trials, and then to bring it out to the public and help millions of people, millions and millions of people for years to come with it. That was my job, because I have a medical degree and the knowledge of the human body and what would be unique within medicine, and the business background. I was in charge of looking for technologies that I felt were really important and needed to come to market.
Awesome.
That's what I did.
So that's what you did. You found technology, you found some cutting edge stuff that the scientists go, hey, there's something of promise here that, a little bit more work and this can be viable. And right. you go and you look for those things that can possibly be taken that extra yard to actually help people. That's pretty exciting. Correct. Have you found more than one thing that way?
Oh, I can't even imagine how many thousand I've read through. I ended up with probably 40 or 50 I thought were truly disruptive and very important. But you used a couple of words in there that I have to correct you on. You said something like a little bit and that small amount or something. There was nothing little or small about that process. Taking a technology from discovery to market is very lengthy, unbelievably expensive, and risky. So you're looking for investors for like upwards of 10 or $30 million worth of that time, years, 10, 15 years. And then at the end of the day, there's a risk attached, which is that for whatever reason, it may not be viable, for market. So it was a very exciting and very, very risky career. I enjoyed it tremendously. I learned a lot, but I also learned that that's not the path I want to follow. I'm 59 years old, which is not young, but I'm not old. It is not old. It is young, but it's not young enough really to be waiting around 10, 15 years to see if something's going to take off. I wanted to do something now and impact people now.
Gotcha. So you shared before about some of the medical breakthroughs that you've been working with. Do you want to share some of that with our audience today?
I would love to. And I'm going to do my very best to start small to give us a point of reference and keep it simple enough, because I could definitely go on and on, but I promise I won't. And if at some point it sounds like I'm just going into too much detail, just go like this, just right above the screen so I can see it. And I cut it off. So we are made up of trillions and trillions of cells. The cell is the smallest independent functional and structural unit in the body. A lot goes on in the cell. That's the one that, as a sperm and an egg becomes one cell, which become 2, 4, 8, and then all of a sudden we're human. And that differentiation process just means that, the cells in that structure know that they're a skin cell versus a kidney cell, but all the cells are the same. Well, you can imagine if that cell is sick in any way damaged or dysfunctional, it is not optimally functional.
Right.
And I liken this a lot to taking a beautiful new Maserati, my passion car. The sound of that engine just puts a chill down my spine. You take a Maserati, you give it 87 octane, you don't change the oil, you don't change the spark plugs, you don't change the filters, and you take it out on the road. Is that going to perform like a Maserati?
Yeah, no.
No, it's going to be chugging up the hill. So we have this cell that is a masterpiece, an absolute brilliant masterpiece with all this, and the cells that become tissues, which become organs, masterfully working together, coordinated efforts to have this whole thing go on for us to function, to be able to move, to be able to think, to be able to eat, digest, and all the feedback mechanisms. So I looked at the cell. Mm-hmm. And I learned that there are things that constitute what we consider aging, and they occur at that cellular level. And there's 3 of them primarily. One of them is about oxidative stress and free radical damage. And I'm sure you've heard of oxidative stress. Most people have. So free radicals are created actually by the cell in the process of making energy. And that's wonderful. You need that energy because you're dead in a second without it. Right? Your brain can't function, your nervous system doesn't work, your heart doesn't. So it's not about running a marathon, it's about sitting still. And so in the process of making the energy, these free radicals are made. And when we're young, we have a system in place in the body, within the cell, that makes antioxidants. Something like 1,000,000 to 1. Like there's no question that there's more than adequate coverage for these free radicals, so there's no damage. But as we age, the system slows down, and the free radical damage accumulates. And that's why there's a chart that looks more or less like this when it comes to disease. Young people aren't expected to get disease, but you hit a certain age and it just accelerates exponentially because of the cumulative effect of the damage to these cells and then their inability to perform their function. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Absolutely.
So that is one of the reasons that we age. It's a big one. There's antioxidants people take externally, astaxanthin and vitamin C and vitamin E and all these other things that are actually being shown to in many ways increase free radicals, not decrease it. And you can't touch the number of free radicals that are developed in a day. Something like, or that we're subjected to, because it's also from outside forces, something like 300 sextillion free radical a day.
Oh, wow.
So if that system remained active in the body, we would never have any free radical damage, and our cells would stay younger, and we would definitely have less, system failure. That's for sure. Because actually, oxidative stress is known to be responsible for over 200 chronic diseases.
Wow. Wow.
Imagine if you could reduce that oxidative stress, right?
Right. Yeah. So if some of the things that we're being told, to ingest because they're antioxidant, right? And that's been a huge buzzword for at least the last 10 years. And they're not actually helping us the way that we're being told that they should be able to help us. What is a better way to support our bodies in creating more of those naturally, rather than taking a pill that's got this in it that's supposed to do this and it's actually like getting messy all over other things? What's the best way to spur the body itself into, hey, let's do a little bit more of this for a little bit longer?
That is the $1 million question. And actually, I have an answer, but I'm actually not going to share it here because I would like to just kind of paint a picture and then get permission for you to be able to inform your viewers at a later date with more detail, just because it is kind of not something I want to share at this time.
No,
but
and that's fine. In fact, we actually have along the ticker at the bottom that if you would like to know more about what Dr. Joan is talking about, text the word spotlight and your name to 413-429-6285. And she'll schedule a private conversation with you to talk about your body, and what can be possible with it. All right? So, Dr. Joan, please continue.
Yeah. So that's one of the theories of aging. Another theory of aging is the mitochondria itself. Most people remember that as the powerhouse of the cell. As we age, there is something called mitochondrial biogenesis. It's the process of creating more mitochondria, which you're constantly making new ones. As they fail to work, you need to create another one within a cell. If it gets damaged, you need a new one, repair of that cell. And as cells divide, as they do when you're growing or when cells die off and you need to replace them, you need to have a brand new mitochondria in that, many new mitochondria in that cell so they can perform their function. Well, as we age, that system too begins to slow down. And the obvious consequence of that is now you have less energy, which is picture an older person, right? We all say, thank God I don't have my young children here at 60 or 59, whatever I am. I have the energy. I still have the energy for them. I really do, but I don't want them. But I could handle it. But when you're young, you've got these little kids, you're racing around with them, and the grandma's looking, going, thank God that they've got the kids. The older we get, the less energy we have. That's the obvious consequence of
Right.
having fewer of the energy producing organelle. But there's also a whole host of diseases associated with that dysfunction as well. Mostly in the area of degenerative neurological diseases. And that's because the nervous system is firing 24/7. There's no break. Your vegetative functions stop. Your brain doesn't stop. Your whatever you've done, you're not moving. So there's fewer there. But if you have dysfunction and a reduction in number, there's a potential for some pretty serious conditions there. And the third most recent and most frequently studied now, although you said you've known about antioxidants for years, there's tens of thousands of studies on oxidative stress, and then various ideas of how that it could be cured. And there's fewer of these other two, but right now there's a lot of research going on by anti-aging scientists at MIT and Harvard.
Okay.
And it's around something called NAD, which is a very abundant enzyme within the body and a cofactor in many activities. So one of them, NAD, is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's located in the cell, of course, and it's involved in energy production. So that process in the Krebs cycle of going from glucose to ATP, if anyone remembers that, requires NAD. It's also required for autophagy, which is the cleaning out of the debris of the cell, which is really important. It's like anything else. You picture an accumulation of dirt or waste product, it impairs the ability of the high functioning parts of that organism or that entity. And then it's also involved in this is what the recent discovery is, something called sirtuin proteins. And sirtuins have to do with that DNA strand, and they actually physically, literally sit on it, protect it, repair it, and also control gene expression. So as we age, a third system that's slowing down is the ability to replenish the used NAD. So as we have decreasing amounts of the NAD, we have less attention to the sirtuins. And when they leave their watch, you have a cell that's unguarded. It's not completely functioning as the cell that belongs in that organ system. So if you have a kidney cell and you have a skin cell and they're differentiated and on target with their task, then you got it all going on. But the sirtuins leave their watch and they kind of wishy-washy in their functioning. You don't really have a cohesive sort of function going on within that cell. The genes that are being expressed are not in line with the organ system. And it's responsible for a lot of disease. And what they're finding is when they're able to promote NAD production through caloric restriction, so that's where people know intermittent fasting and the benefits of that. This is one of them, somewhat of a rise in NAD levels. You have a restoration of that system to some extent. And that is what they're finding with the mice they calorically restrict, is they have demonstrably, appreciably, and quantitatively increased lifespans, but most importantly, health span. They remain healthy. They don't succumb to the diseases that, obesity and aging generally bring on, that of like cancer and diabetes, heart disease, all those things that we all expect in elderly.
It's interesting. While you were discussing that, and you were talking about the parts that are away from their post and leaving the cell unguarded, I kind of flashed back in my memory to a talk one time that Marianne Williamson gave, and she was talking about cancer at the time, and what stuck with me about what she said is cancer is a cell that exists anyway and stops talking to or listening to the system that it's a part of. So one cell goes rogue and it starts, for lack of a better term, rotting the body. Now, is that accurate as far as your perception?
Absolutely accurate in the big picture. The big picture being that the body is a phenomenal healing machine. And all these feedback systems, there are cells that go out there. And when there is 1 to a million rogue cells, which occupy a spot you couldn't even see with a microscope, and they begin to grow out of control, that's the beginning of cancer. And it happens in all of us all the time, all over the place. But we have this whole system of cells that go around and they're looking for this. And autophagy, they actually kill those cells. So why did that system fail? Why didn't it recognize it? Was there too many of them in two different places? Was there an impairment of that system that's supposed to recognize them? What about our external environment or the way we treated our bodies made us ill prepared to take on that challenge? Yes, that might be specific to sirtuins leaving their watch. It could be anyone. It could be too much free radical damage so that the cells are impaired. It could be any of one of a number of these things, but there's no doubt that cancer is not so much something someone gets, but was unable to prevent. We're unable to combat it early on.
Gotcha. Interesting stuff. Lots of really interesting stuff. All right. Do you have any final words that you would like to leave our audience with today, Dr. Joan?
I think that, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I hope this goes out there and hits a lot of people, because I think we feel somewhat out of control in general, out of control with what's going on in the government, certainly out of control with what's going on with the coronavirus, the economy, with our genes. Oh my gosh, I'm fated to a whatever. I'm home. I'm going to have to put on weight. I mean, we're constantly seeing ourselves as victims. And you know what? I've never played the victim role. My children were allowed to say something once and then they did something. Complaining was not an option. You do something about it, because there's always something. So if I can impart people with nothing else, it's the fact that we have a lot of control over our lives and our fate, especially physically and medically. And that when you understand, some people go, oh, forget the plastics, I want to live my life. Well, no, because it's quality of life in the meantime. No. And if you're of the mind that you'd like to live your best possible life, and with all your faculties and all your abilities, and then there are things you can do. And when you start at the cellular level, that's key. You work your way from the cells up, because there could still be a failing within an organ system that didn't involve the cell, but you can be sure that every cell's damage is going to be reflected through the whole system. So I would be very honored to be able to have a one-on-one and share more of what I know with anybody who is looking for a change and ready to take control of their lives and their health.
Excellent. Excellent. And to that end, once again, for all of our audience today, please text the word spotlight with your name to 413-429-6285. And Dr. Joan Tekula will reach out to you and schedule a time to have a conversation one-on-one together. Okay? Awesome.
Thank you so much, Gayle. It was a wonderful experience. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Joan. Have a wonderful day.
Stay healthy.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
When you actual energy work makes that recovery progress so much faster. That recovery is possible. You do not have to live as a victim until your last days. You have unbelievable strength, and I know that because you're still here. Do you want to create something completely unrecognizable with your life? I can show you how.